So glad, DEIPL folks, that you are here tonight. This is a really important intersection of the work of peace and justice and the work of Earth Care Task Force. So I'm really glad to be able to have you all here to help bring that together. And we are all aware of examples of environmental injustice, the siting of power plants and factories, and other polluters in low-income areas, and other examples such as lack of access to good food and fewer parks. So again, thank you. Delaware Interfaith Power and Light, for those who don't know, is an organization that works with faith communities and community partners to address climate change and its impacts. So I'm going to introduce Lisa, who's going to introduce everybody else. Lisa is a good friend of mine. We've worked together for I don't know how many years now.
Yeah.
She is now program director at DEIPL. DEIPL helped Westminster get its energy audit several years ago, and one of the big impacts from that was upgrading all of our light fixtures to fixtures that were much more energy efficient, which lowered our carbon footprint and saved the church a lot of money. And that's thanks always to Roger, who went around and replaced 400 and some tubes and fixtures. Lisa has a deep commitment to the environment and sustainability and boundless energy. So with that, take it away.
Thank you, Sally. This is great. And as Sally said, we've got a nice years-long relationship with Westminster. We've worked with your Earth Care Task Force closely, and we were part of that wonderful One Act of Conservation project that you did that we have shared with others since then. It was such a cool idea. Are those of you on the call, do you remember that One Act of Conservation that they did? Well, it was very creative, and we can talk about it later if we have time, but we have so much to cover tonight. And so we just really appreciate being here with you. And I'll tell you up front that this has really provided us with an opportunity to possibly create a template for a kind of presentation that we could share with other congregations. So we have been doing a lot of outreach, a lot of work in environmental justice, but we really are looking at it a little differently tonight of how we can bring this group of us together to present something that's going to be really meaningful and valuable to congregations. So you're a test case for us, so we appreciate it. So yes, we are so let me ask you, how many of you, though, before this were familiar with us? See, not everybody. Okay, so good. You will learn about this partnership, but IPL, Interfaith Power and Light, is one of 40 state affiliates. So there are 40 states that are working together collectively in their own individual ways, but we are network all the time to address the causes and the consequences of climate change. And what I always like to underscore, to scientifically inform and spiritually deepen our understanding of our relationship with each other and with the natural world, and then to act on those understandings. We believe that, let's see, where do I want to move? I wanted to let you know what the evening is going to look like. After we finish up these sort of introductions, then we're going to begin with John Sykes, who is our founder and current board president, who's going to give us sort of the broader overview, kind of the framing the environmental justice issue. Then Shweta Arya, who is our outreach director, is going to come on and talk about DEIPL's supporting programs and how they um, support those issues. And then Laveda Owens-White, who is our vice president of our board and a community health nurse and a connector of dots and people throughout the state, is going to share her very personal, on the ground, in the homes experience with individuals and communities related to climate change and environmental justice issues. And then we were so pleased to have Marvin Hagwood join us, who is a senior at Delaware State. He has been our intern for a year and a half now. It's been fabulous. And he's just going to take a few minutes to give a little bit of the youth perspective to this whole thing, which I think all of you would appreciate. And then we hope to still have some time at the end, not only for a few questions from you, but we have a few questions from you. We have a few questions for you, so that we hope to have a little bit of a conversation and then figure out maybe some next steps or how we move forward. So sound good? All right. Well, with that, I'm just going to turn it over to John Sykes.
Thank you. There we go. It seems to be working here. Let me see if I can get rid of this. There we go. All right. So I'll put this into slideshow mode here, and then I'll walk through it. I'm guessing that since you've been working this space for a while, that many of you are familiar with the SDOH, the social determinants of health. On that, there are 5 basic ones, and there's a number of additional ones as well, ranging from social, community context, economic stability, healthcare, education, neighborhoods, and environment. And they all comprise what determines good health, bad health within a specific environment. The definition is conditions in the places where people live, learn, work, and play that affect a wide range of health risks and outcomes. I'm going to focus on neighborhood and built environment on there, although they all intersect as well and build on or subtract from one another. In the neighborhood and built environment and environmental risks, there are harmful emissions or air quality that has direct impact on health. And you can think of things like asthma as a very good example of how that can directly harm everybody from infants to the elderly and people who are also dealing with various ailments. Toxic waste dumps. This is probably amongst the more familiar environmental injustices that there are communities that are built on what used to be toxic waste dumps. And the reason that they were is that that's where the cheap land is as well. Energy inequity, we'll spend some time on that. There's so much around climate that has to do with energy that we'll spend a little bit of time with that. Severe weather ranging from heating to flooding to drought. And then, as was mentioned earlier, food deserts. In a lot of the frontline communities, there just is not a place where you can get fresh food. So this goes back about a year ago. I pulled this off the web to show the difference between communities of people of color versus Caucasians, and to show where the worst injustices are. And this is just in Newcastle County, but just the release of toxic chemicals. And you can see that there is a much greater ratio for people of color than for Caucasian. Cancer risks from air pollutants, it's almost a 2-to-1 on that. Superfund sites, oddly enough, are equal. I'm not sure I understand that. But then facilities that emit critical air pollutants, that's about a 4-to-1 ratio of the folks that are suffering are the ones who are the non-Caucasians as well. And this is certainly indicative of environmental injustices. Here's an interesting chart that is not too difficult I mean, it's easy to see. By the way, I've got about 8 slides here, and I put them into a PDF that I have sent out to my team, who can share them with you. So if you'd like to see these, be able to read them in a little more detail. But you can see what they show here as the white areas are what the risks are, and then the risk reduction in the dark print here. These just don't happen. They have to be planned, and frankly, a lot of the risks and the conditions that are so very harmful don't happen by chance either. Just my opinion. But when you look at this, ranging from along the water up until a little more inland on there, and you can see who gets hurt the worst, and then how can you deal with that. Certainly takes planning and resources as well. But this is just to show you where and how these things occur. This is also in the slide, or in the slide deck that I left, this eye chart here, but it talks about on the left the 7 different aspects of climate change, and then what's the driver within those, what kind of exposure do you see, what's the potential health outcome, and then the impact of those things. If we take something like extreme heat, and most of you all are in the Wilmington area, of course, that Wilmington being a city with lots of dark pavement and dark roofs is in something called a heat island. And that means that the heat that comes down in the summer sun gets trapped into that island and heats up. And then even in the evening and in the nighttime, it doesn't cool off very much as well. And there can be as much as a several degree difference of temp in the city versus just outside of the city on that. The risk, of course, from a health aspect, and Levada may touch on that, is that the body needs some time to refresh. And if you don't have that time to refresh, if it doesn't cool down in the evening, you have another day and another day, and it gets to the point where folks just don't deal with that very well at all, especially when you look at the low income folks who either can't afford air conditioning, or if they have air conditioning, can't afford to run them. Again, this will be in the slide deck if anybody wants to look at that with a little more detail. Climate resilience. How does one or a community start planning to deal with the aspects of climate change that I just very quickly went through as well? The good news is it is possible to slow it down and adapt to it, and even to start building an economy around turning it into more resilient area. There are a number of resources. There is an NAACP toolkit that was put together by a wonderful woman named Jackie Patterson. Not too big, it's only 600 pages long, but it is updated every year, and it is phenomenal on that. It's something worth looking through. Models that work. If you look at Philly, if you look at New York and DC and other places, that they have worked on this and they have been able to start making some headway on that. Just one little simple example, or 2 examples of that. One in New York, that the Empire State Building is a LEED Gold building. That means that they've been able to turn that into a very energy efficient building on that. And it was made, I don't know how many years ago it was gone there. And Wilmington, and Philly has a extreme heat resistance plan that is also very good and relies on people helping each other get through the harder parts as well. Wilmington, in December, the city council adopted the 2028 comprehensive plan, and it was accepted or approved by the governor the following January, which is January of this year. Given that it's a 2028 plan, this covers about 8 years of planning on there. And I'll show you little components of that in a minute or so. But it is very much worthwhile to become familiar with that and to take the planning department up on that plan and make sure that folks have a chance to respond to it and to become part of that plan. DNREC has some pretty good technical support that we've worked with. When the infamous merger occurred between Delmarva Power, Pepco Holdings, and then Exelon Energy, one of the things that was done to make the package more acceptable and to get buy-off by the 5 different organizations, 5 different governments that had to sign off on, is that Exxon put $4 million on the table for low-income energy efficiency projects, specifically for Delmarva clients. After years of planning and trying to figure out how to make that work, they've now started making awards. Habitat for Humanity got the largest award so far, which is about $500,000. And that's specifically for refrigerator replacement for low income. And the deal there is that if somebody in a low income community has an old refrigerator, it's probably very inefficient, costing them money, and could be potentially putting nasty stuff into the atmosphere. Habitat will arrange to replace that for free with a high efficiency one. The deal is that you can't keep the old one. In Lower Slower Delaware, less than $100,000, they got a seed grant to install mobile homes, insulated mobile home skirting, which will cut the energy loss down there. And then, while it hasn't been formally announced, this week our very own DEIPL was awarded somewhere around $80,000 to build interior storm windows for low-income folks, and the windows are built by people from the community, so they will get paid to build these essentially double-paned interior storm windows, which will help cut heat loss by quite a bit as well. And that's going to be built in a quote-unquote factory on the 2nd and 3rd floor of Temple United Church in West Central City. And then there's also Energize Delaware, which has various programs, and LIHEAP, of course. The NAACP Climate Change Toolkit. Again, this is a rather large document. I've got it in PDF. But this will show you some of the things that are included in there, but it's very comprehensive. And it's worth taking a look at if one is working within or working in a neighborhood that's a frontline community, and to try to deal with some of the climate and environmental risks that are there. It tells you how to do it, how to lobby for better regulations on it, etc. So that's very much worth using, having that in one's back pocket if you got a large back pocket, if you're going to be dealing with issues within a frontline community. And then the Wilmington 2028 Comp Plan, it's got 5 or 6 major goals. The first one is strong and safe neighborhood, which is really needed. And then goal 5, which is very much climate oriented, sustainability and resilient city, with goals around green infrastructure, greenhouse gas emissions reduction, as well, water quality work. And then on the 5th is to promote resilience to climate change and flooding all along the area, in the planning area. And it does talk about reduced heat impact, the cooling centers, weatherization assistance, and then how to deal with this terrible urban heat island effect. So what do we do? Next steps is power to the people through partnerships. Partnerships are extremely important from within the community and building out. It's organized from the neighborhood building up, follow the roadmap, and then to become part of the Wilmington 2028 Comp Plan. they get into the city planner's office and say, hey, we're here. We want to make sure that we understand what you're doing and our voices are heard. And then also finally to take a seat at the government table. Oftentimes, and I can give you an example of that, there was a committee that was formed, an advisory committee that was formed called the Energy Efficiency Advisory Committee that had to do with helping the utilities come up with good energy efficiency projects. I was nominated to sit on that committee representing low income. I'm sitting in Lewis. What more can I say? That committee needs to have people from the neighborhoods or areas that they are supporting who are part of the decision-making process. And then demand action on some pretty significant things that have not occurred here, but certainly more work on energy efficiency and renewable energy. Community solar almost came up in the last legislative session, but updated building codes is really important for the rentals so that the landlords have to put good quality insulation, et cetera, in there, and to use local labor as well. And I hope that whatever administration we have in DC that is next places a high priority on these items because it is sorely needed, as you well know. And that's it from me.
Thank you, John. Well, that was really, really good. So now I would like to invite Shweta.
Hey, hello everyone. Thank you so much for having us. My name is Shweta Arya. I'm the outreach director for Delaware Interfaith Power and Light, and I joined this wonderful organization beginning of this year, and it's been a pleasure working with all the faith communities. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just speak for just a little bit, just talking about Delaware Interfaith Power and Light, our mission, our work, and our programs. And I just have one slide to share. So, as briefly Lisa shared, Delaware Interfaith Power and Light is part of one of the 40 state affiliate chapters of the National Interfaith Power and Light, which was established in the year 2000. And our shared mission is to, can everybody hear me all right?
Yes.
Okay. And our shared mission is to, inspire and mobilize people of faith to take bold and just action. We heard this great presentation from John, and I know that we're presenting to this amazing group, which has been meeting for so long, and you're already doing great works. But what we do as Delaware Interfaith Power and Light is we work with faith communities all around the state, right? And, providing this, a religious response, what do you say, to climate change, right? So working with faith communities to act on climate change, with creation care teams, social justice and environmental justice teams like yourself. Through our programs, and then, through advocacy, through outreach and education. So we've been doing, all these monthly webinar series right now to, inform people on climate action. What actions can faith communities take, right? These are some of the programs that we have, like faith efficiencies, energy audits. We do exhaustive energy audits for congregations. That is totally funded by Energize Delaware. Until the end of the year, it is actually totally free. And Climate Conversations is another one of our programs. And we believe that you know, having these kind of conversations are really important. And, you know, so we've been doing these climate conversations. We've had like 20 of these so far in communities, and we've, you know, since COVID hit, we've been having these climate conversations virtually. You know, they have been really successful. And lately we've been having a lot of these conversations with young people. And I think one of the most important things about climate change we do is really talk about it. One of the other programs that we have is Windows of Hope, and John Ollie. That's exactly what we do in the underserved communities. You know, give people opportunities to, you know, to build these, you know, window inserts and utilize them in the low-income communities where they can reduce the utility bills. So basically, through these programs, what we're trying to do is, you know, asking faith communities to actually address missions, and you know, houses of worship can actually be like a model for sustainability and inspire their community members, you know, to do this. And the most important thing we can actually we do is also work on advocacy and, you know, advocating for better climate action in Delaware. You know, we recently worked for you know, SB 250, you know, advocating for community solar, and right now working with the group called Power Delaware, you know, to support offshore wind right here in Delaware. So, you know, that's something all faith communities can do, is come together and, you know, provide that moral voice to climate action. We've recently created this group called Delaware Intercampus Climate Climate Coalition, where a lot of campus, you know, youth have come together. There are like 5 campuses from all over the state that have come together to create this group with us. And we've been meeting on a monthly basis. And, you know, no climate action is actually possible without engaging the youth. And then we have Marvin, and he'll probably talk about it. He's part of the group. And one other program that we have is that we recently started is Sacred Grounds. It is part of National Wildlife Federation's program. And, you know, it's basically a certification program for congregations to address how we can sustainably manage the land around congregations. Research shows that 8% of the land, habitable land, is occupied by, you know, faith institutions. And if we can manage that land sustainably, we can, you know, by creating rain gardens or pollinator habitats, or, you know, by creating community gardens to address food insecurity. There's a lot that can be done on the grounds. So just providing all these platforms for communities, faith communities, to come together and act on climate. That's the role that you know, DIPL is playing in, you know, in Delaware. And we'd love to work with your team as well. And that's, you know, that's all I share.
Thank you, Shweta.
And I will stop sharing.
Now, Levita, tell us what's going on the streets.
Thank you so much, everyone. I just going to share my screen as well. Let me see if I could get it. Here I go. I've been introduced, and I am a faith community nurse. And so I have been throughout from Marcus Hook all the way down to Sussex County in connecting with congregations and public health services. And in light of this coronavirus epidemic that has occurred, I've been involved with the screening and testing for Corona. And over these last 6 months that we've been engaged, we have certainly had illuminated the fact that environmental injustice has a disproportionate impact on communities of color and low income communities. And when we're talking about climate change, and in my community, that isn't really catch the attention of a lot of people. And as we talked about in an earlier format with another organization, that people are concerned about their health. The climate, when you relate your climate to the impact on your health, then they sit up and take notice. So a lot of my slides were related to what John had on his slides in terms of climate change, and I'll see how I could advance this. I think I showed this earlier, that never doubt that a small group of thoughtful, committed citizens can change the world. Indeed, it has. It's the only thing that ever has. Back in 1999, the city of Wilmington formed a health planning council. And this was one of the quotes that we adopted, because we see that Wilmington itself does not have a health department. So we needed to address the concerns of our residents around their health issues. And we were a small band of people. Not all of us were in the health arena, but some of us were in related allied health fields. So we came together to try and address some of the concerns that we had. And when we talk about environmental justice, we talk about how climate change affects human health in ways that extreme changes in weather and environment can increase those existing health problems, as well as how they can create new ones that didn't even exist. So when we look at the global effect of climate change, we're all concerned and trying to see how it affects the essential factors that influence human health, which includes our safety of shelter, our air quality, the quality and safety and supply of our drinking water, food availability and nutrition levels in our food. And in some of our communities, that is quite a problem because we do have food deserts. And so while we are looking at those various influences, some of our, because of loss of jobs, most recently, our families have lost their shelter, and that is a concern. Some of the, particularly back in the summer when the weather was hot, the children, there was increased asthma admissions in the hospital situation. Our kids were cooped up oftentimes in houses that John talked about could be hot ovens if you don't have air conditioning. And if you don't have, if you're in an urban environment where there's lack of trees, it's hard to get to the park. Transportation is a problem, trying to get to the parks for a lot of kids. But one of the things that we're trying to work on is making our parks safe and suitable for families to congregate. So addressing climate change is vital to help limit and decrease some of these health risks. John talked about the social determinants of health. And certainly when we're speaking of of health, there's a body of science that finds that people of color and those living in poverty are more likely to be affected, that those are exposed to higher levels of environmental pollution, particularly in the city with our traffic, um, gas emissions from automobiles, and sometimes we have heavy industry trucks going through and just polluting. You could see exhaust gases coming out of the trucks, and with the people who are walking on the street, the children that are in the strollers, they're waiting for buses or walking along, and the buses are idling, and our babies are breathing in that kind of those kind of gas emissions. So people in our communities are exposed on a daily basis to high pollution levels from industrial sources and toxic pollutions, and sometimes when it's heavy rains, our stormwater um, drainage systems sometimes are flooding our streets, and sometimes our houses are getting flooded. The basements are getting flooded out, particularly in our Southbridge communities. So these are the concerns that people are having. I'm sorry, I'm going forward. That are having going forward, catching up. That we want to build a healthy community around. So when we're talking about, John mentioned the social determinants of health. Again, these are some of it. Our concerns. We want access to education and economic and job opportunities, and we want access to healthcare. And sometimes a healthcare institution can be right around the block or a few blocks from you. But if you have mobility problems, or you have a lot of kids that you can't be taking each one, taking all of them to the federally qualified health center altogether, those are issues that we have to be concerned about. So neighborhood health centers would be a great asset to the community, and having community centers that support community-based resources. Those are the things that people are worried about. And again, transportation options. Not the bus doesn't always stop on the corner. They have so many stops that they stop at. But again, if you're having mobility problems, and those can be very hindering. I know downtown Wilmington, we have some hills that I think some hikers would get out of breath trying to climb. So when we think about people not having transportation and having to walk those hills, it could be very daunting. Public safety is an issue we have in all areas of our community throughout Delaware. We all have to worry about the crime and the violence that's going on. So public safety is another issue. So aside from air, water and food quality, the health risks that we all bear throughout our life cycle, safety risks in our homes, workplaces, and schools and communities, and energy use and sustainable energy. A lot of our homes that have high electric bills, that they have to go to community agencies and our state service centers with help so that they can pay their electric bills. And hopefully the Delaware Interfaith Power and Light is trying to address some of those issues through, again, our windows of hope. And then some of our churches are faithful in helping people with their emergency assistance and trying to pay their electric bills or their water bills, and in some cases, their rent. So those are all issues that of concern for us. So what are we doing to try to mitigate some of those concerns? Well, certainly we have some community groups that have organized and trying to come together as a collective. The Delaware Concerned Residents for the Environment, Environmental Justice was founded in 2011 in response to the Episcopal Church of St. Andrews and Matthews observance of the season of creation and their commitment to the rights of Mother Earth. And from that, since 2011, they've grown into other community coalitions that would be the Delaware chapter of the Sierra Club, the Community Housing and Empowerment Connections, and the Minority Workforce Development Coalition. People are getting together to try and address the concerns of their community. So we're calling for education, information, empowerment. We're pressing for more resources related to the clean air, water, land, and food. Some of our communities have taken steps to counter the recurring argument that our lifestyles have a broader influence rather than environmental factors that are responsible for our health problems. And a group of us met with just 2 weeks ago with Dr. Carol Rattay, Director for Public Health, in addressing some of those concerns, because there was an article she had written some time ago that more or less accused the African American community of some of the health problems related to lifestyle in light of this COVID-19 season. So we've had to come together and conduct our own health studies. This has been ongoing. I know one air monitoring system that happened maybe 3 years ago had a big influence in shutting down the steel company that was in North Wilmington, in the Claymont area. So we are taking matters into our own hands and trying to remedy some of those factories that are polluting us. DNREC, the Delaware Natural Resource and Environmental Commission, has a program for they fine factories when they do a lot of polluting, and that those fines go through to helping the community with their concerns and projects in their community, like reducing lead paint in homes and trying to do community gardens and things of that nature. So we have been invested in working with the Newcastle County Land Use on the Route 9 corridor. It's called the Route 9 Industrial Task Force. And we're lucky to have DNREC involved so that they can provide tools to support us in our efforts to neighbors rebuilding our neighborhoods, and our concerned residents and the community housing. All these organizations coming together, and I am delighted because, as Lisa mentioned, I am one for connecting the dots. Let the right hand know what the left hand is doing. In saying that, I am with an organization of Chi Eta Phi Sorority Inc. It's a nursing sorority of all registered nurses, and connecting them to the Alliance of Nurses for a Healthy Environment, which is an organization around the country and also around the world. And we're acting at the intersection of health and the environment to promote health in our communities. So we have a group of nurses from all walks of our occupation in the institutional setting, in the community setting, that is interested in keeping our communities healthy. And we're working to connect and guide others and working with our legislators to get some of the changes that we need changed. Delaware needs legislators who will stand up for clean air and clean water in particular. So that looks like, earlier this month, the Newcastle County Council approved a resolution urging the rejection of a permit sought by the British-owned chemical company Croda, which is right across the Delaware River from us, that a couple of years ago had really caused great alarm to our community, causing having to shut down its plant because of emissions of those chemicals into the air. And they were looking to a permit to build storage tanks at the Atlas Point site, which is in Newcastle County. And so the community rose up in alarm, and there was a resolution passed to shut that down quick and in a hurry. So we're really grateful for the opportunity to have our voices heard. And in light of the coronavirus epidemic, it has just highlighted the need that people need to listen to those who are most affected by these environmental changes. They need to listen to the voice of our community. So thank you very much for the time you've given me to point out some of our concerns, and hopefully that you will invite us to speak to whomever cares to listen.
Thanks for
Thank you.
bringing it close to home, Levada. Now, Marvin, will you take us out here before we start with questions and tell us what, share your youth perspective of straighten out us old folks here.
How's everybody doing?
Good.
My name is Marvin Hagwood. I'm the intern with Dell IPL. I've been interning with them for about a year, a little over a year. And just to touch on, even what Ms. Levada was saying, climate change has really affected, low income and communities of color. One thing, definitely that affects these communities that I just wanted to add is definitely extreme weather conditions. So sometimes when these communities, low income communities, are affected by, any types of extreme weather, city officials usually put more effort towards the higher income communities, which can really affect the low income communities because they're not receiving that same type of effort from the city. And this can, result in displacement of residents, and also can even cause death, from some of the disasters. And, talking about youth, children are very, affected, especially in some of the disproportionate communities, especially children of color. Children of color who live in urban areas are at the highest risk for lead poisoning caused by lead-based paint. A study done by the CDC was actually done, and it says that 11.2% of African-American children and 4.0% of Mexican-American children are poisoned by lead. And this is very important because it can cause health problems, things like anemia, seizures, and brain development issues. And so, backpack off of that, as youth, it's very important, as youth, we're looking at our future. I'm in school now, I'm graduating this fall. And so I'm already looking at, my future, the things that I want to pursue, in the incoming years. And one thing that is going to affect that is the climate. So, it is definitely important to, spread the word and talk about it and to let people know, like Shweta was saying, it's very important to talk about it and have these conversations. And, we've been emphasizing the climate conversations because they're important, DEICC, which is a new organization under the IPO and Energize Delaware. We're trying to, spread the word and make more awareness across campuses and across Delaware, because at my school, climate change isn't talked about in classes as much as it can be, because of everything else going on, but it can always be talked about more, amongst our families and amongst, our peers and things like that. But it's definitely important for youth because we're looking at our future. And regarding, the election coming up and voting, it's very important to vote. This is going to be my first time voting, and it's a good thing to even see some of the candidates, or even not even some of the candidates, but just climate change being talked about, period. Whether, people are for it or against it, just the topic being brought up is very important. And it's good to see because as youth, we're watching it, the people who are the kids, the youth, the teenagers, the young adults who are looking at these, discussions are seeing that climate change is something that is being talked about. And that's very important. And, even in grades such as elementary, as young as elementary, I believe that it's important to talk about climate change because that starts us off at a young age, so we're able to grow up and be comfortable with it. Like Mr. Veda was saying, that in certain communities, it's not as talked about. It's not as something that people are very open to as much. But I believe that talking about it at a younger age and getting people more comfortable with it is definitely important. And that's about it. Yeah. That's about it. Thank you, guys.
Thank you, Marvin. Well, let me transition here. So I've been involved in grassroots environmental and social justice, social issues for 25, 30 years now. And I have to say that if I've learned nothing else in the intersection of my personal life, my career, and my spiritual journey, it is the critical need for us to deepen our understanding and reverence for the intricate connections and web of life. We need to make that understanding more real and more relevant to our lives, to our experiences, and to our moral sensibilities, and then find ways to translate that understanding into effective action. And so we'd like to, I'm going to open this up. I'm going to pose 3 questions for any of you to answer, but then you can also feel free to ask us questions. But for the remaining period, we'll just open it up here for an interactive discussion. So in light of making it real and relevant, are you aware of impacts of climate change affecting an environmental health, affecting the health and quality of life in your own community, either in your church community or in your home community? Are you aware of the impacts of climate change disproportionately affecting low income and communities of color in your communities? And are you aware of efforts or strategies in your community to address those issues? And I think a lot is going on that we are just not aware of. So I think this could be really valuable in the last few minutes that we have to talk about our own personal experiences with these issues. Would anyone like to start?
I can say a couple things. Used to work for Hercules. Hercules had a golf course around the research center. The golf course failed. It was bought by a developer. And the developer has decided to build homes on steeply wooded land. In August, we had 5 inches of rain here in about 5 hours. And it was a ridiculous amount of water that was in the runoff. And we are in a steeply, there's a steep slope behind us that was developed. So I talked to the county council persons, emailed them and talked about not allowing development on the steeply sloped lands around the Hercules, former Hercules Research Center, now the golf course. And they said, oh, it's a done deal. We can't stop it. There was, I think, both opposition on the council to stopping it, and there was also, at least the council person in that area was in favor of stopping it. But because of COVID, potential monies never came from the state. They didn't even bring it up because the state legislature, of course, stops meeting on, what is it, June 30th? And they never picked up the bills to get money to perhaps put that land into some sort of a position where it would not be so fully developed.
Mm.
So it just is a combination of, we couldn't stop it because of legal things. We couldn't stop it because this legislature didn't meet. We couldn't stop it because the head of the legislature, whoever was in the majority position, decided not to take up that particular piece of legislation. That's on one side. On the other side is we need to rewrite the rules for development. And because the water that falls on the land along the red clay, where does it end up? Flooding will occur downstream. Downstream is where the Christina, the Brandywine, the red clay all come together. And who's going to suffer when all that flooding occurs? It's going to be the low-income houses down there, the low-income areas, the flatlands, the areas next to where the rivers join, and they get flooded out again. But we have an opportunity to have input in how new regulations are written for land use. And that's where we have to focus our efforts on now, is let's rewrite the rules. The rules have to change for all the buildings that we do because the climate has changed. We get rain events now that we've never seen before. 5 inches in 5 hours, 3 inches in an hour. These type of rain events are occurring, and we have an infrastructure that can't handle that. So we have both a burden of laws written to protect people using the land the way that they want to. Don't take my land. That's called the taking thing. But then we have the other consideration of, we have to consider what your right against the right of other people not to have their homes destroyed.
Right.
And we have to come against together to say what is right about this, and we have to rewrite a lot of these things. So I
Those
think
are
that goes to your
great.
question number 2 and question number 3. What is our strategy? And our strategy needs to be inputting into these land use plans, which are being written now, and
Yes.
they have to be
Yes.
modified.
Great
2035.
examples, Roger. Those are great examples. Someone else?
I live in Hockessin, near Route 82 and Yorkland Road, the site of the former NVF plant. I moved here 27 years ago when the plant was in operation, and summer nights when the windows were open, you could hear them blowing out the stacks in the plant. In making vulcanized fiber, zinc and mercury were utilized. The red clay creek was virtually dead. We would call DENREC when these exhausts would occur, and they would say, unless we can be there and see it, there's nothing we can do. But over time, the violations were egregious enough, the problems significant enough. Actually, the only thing that caused that plant to shut down was when they didn't pay their water bill for 9 months, and the state finally shut them down. But the remediation that's been done and the partnership of government and public and private organizations to restore that land has been really heartening. And now you can fish in the Red Clay Creek, at least on
Really?
one
Wow.
side of the bridge there. They stock it every spring, and there are fishermen there, fisher kids all the time, pathways, walkways. It's
Hmm.
eventually going to connect with the Ashland Nature Center. It was a Superfund site of sorts, so $1 million of, I think, federal money was available to clean it up. It certainly has enhanced the air quality and the water quality in the area. It shows what can be done. This is a more affluent area of the county. Certainly that played a role, I'm sure, in this project being funded.
Hmm.
But it offers hope because what looked to be just a horrific mess of chemicals and death is turning into something vibrant and hopeful. So,
Right. No, that is another good, that's another great example. Anything maybe a little smaller, subtler green space?
So mine's quite a lot smaller. but
Okay, good.
Something of concern to me. I've been campaigning. I live in a neighborhood that's got some open space. I think maybe 9 acres. That seems like too much, but anyway, if I've been working to try to get some native tree plants and native trees planted, and it's been surprisingly difficult because nobody's involved, nobody cares. The people holding the purse strings don't care. Finally, and they've been just plopping down. We had Bradford pears. We
Oh, no.
still have some of them. And then this person's just been plopping down these these green giant things that do nothing for the environment. But finally, we have about 5 red maples. It wasn't the white oak that I had been hoping for, but at least it's a little teeny tiny piece.
Mhm. And Shweta, talk just a minute about the importance of the green space, even to environmental health and justice.
Right. So, so there are like studies that I know whenever we talk about environmental justice, we also talk about, urban spaces which are not green enough, right? So, to take a holistic look and, increase the green spaces in those urban space, in urban spaces just does so much good, right? So it can cool the temperatures, right? It can, the air becomes more cleaner. And there are studies being done that, when you create more green spaces in urban areas, the violence goes down. So, it impacts our mental health, it impacts our physical health. So, it's just so important that when we take care of our environment around us, our health improves. Like, it's just so intrinsically connected. So yeah, just wanted to mention that.
Pollinator gardens, food desert issues, it just, and these are things that are so happy and encouraging that have significant impacts. Sally?
Just a little quick time check.
Yes.
Do you figure we have about 5 minutes?
Yeah.
sure.
Great. This has been just a fantastic discussion. I've learned so much, and there's so many areas to work on.
I do have to ask the question if the city of Wilmington has an arborist. Anybody
They
know?
do.
They do.
Yes.
Interesting.
I met one a few years ago, and I assume he's still there. In fact, we even had a city tour with the person in charge of real estate and the arborist, and we went around. Sally, were you on that? Maybe not.
I was not.
We actually had a little tour of Wilmington and checked on open spaces and places for existing community gardens, and it was very cool. And then things fell apart for certain reasons, but yes, I believe they do.
Imagine, like, just taking an example of Wilmington, even if all faith communities came together and just utilize the, ground around them, and, to create more community gardens, rain gardens or pollinator habitats instead of growing grass, like, how much good it can do, add to the community. By the way, we did a great webinar recently on, growing tiny forest in smaller spaces. And so somebody, so it's, it is a concept that was started by a Japanese biologist, and he created this concept called Miyawaki forest. And now they're creating Miyawaki forests all around the world. The forest grows 10 times faster because they compact, they put too many trees close together. And, it increased biodiversity, makes the environment cooler, so many advantages to it. Just wanted to
And Shweta arranged this presentation with someone in India, which was very cool. So that was so cool. But yeah, and then for the faith communities can be models, like you were saying, Shweta, for their larger communities. They can, provide educational resources. And I think there's a lot of potential there. And we need some uplifting things, don't we? These days, and things that are manageable that we can do. We can do this.
Doug Tallamy, who is, I think, at least US renowned entomologist from the University of Delaware, makes a compelling case that it's really, really critical to use these smaller spaces, that if we use the smaller spaces,
Yes.
we can do just so much good, because so much is taken out of commission right now with parking lots, et cetera.
And one last thing too, as if we can get more engaged in things like this that are more manageable, that are more uplifting, and it can get us more, it can deepen our understanding, get us more committed to these issues, than to be able to take on the larger issues that need our, whether it's power plants or, the more serious polluting elements. But it's a way to get people in and involved in understanding. So
that is a very good point, Lisa. And I just am so thankful to you all, to each speaker tonight. Brought so much good education. I'm glad this is recorded. And I feel energized about the opportunities to do some good.
great. Well, it's our pleasure, and we love working with Westminster. So
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
all right, thanks for all being here, and we'll stay in touch.
Indeed.
Good.
Thank you.
Take
Take
care. all.
care.
Thank you, Sally.
Thank you, Lisa.
Thank you,
Thank you,
Roger.
Sally.
Later.
John.
Appreciate it.
Thank
Good
you,
night.
Rita.
Good night.
Good night.